Welcome to A Better Divorce podcast, where we have conversations about the emotional, financial, and legal issues that are on your mind or should be on your radar if your goal is to keep your divorce out of court. I'm collaborative divorce attorney and mediator Andrea Vacca, and I know that how you divorce matters to your long-term well-being. That's why it's my mission to help you have a better divorce with as little acrimony as possible, so that you can create the best life possible on the other side of your marriage. Hi, everyone. I'm thrilled to welcome Karen McMahon to A Better Divorce podcast today, who I consider to be one of the top divorce coaches in the country. Karen is a certified relationship and divorce coach and founder of the Journey Beyond Divorce. She leads a national team of divorce coaches who support men and women around the world to become clear and calm and confident as they navigate divorce. She's also the host of the Journey Beyond Divorce podcast, which I just learned has over 1 million downloads. So congratulations on that, Karen.
Thank you.
So Karen, you and I have known each other for years, and I've seen the excellent work you've done with clients to help them navigate their divorces and calmly and with dignity. And in fact, that was the name of the workshop we used to give together, if you remember all those years ago, Navigate Your Divorce with Dignity. So welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy you could join me today as we discuss how you help clients feel more empowered and clear-headed so they can make the best decisions possible in their divorces.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm excited about our conversation we have. You were one of the first attorneys that I began to collaborate with when I got into the business. And so it's just been so exciting to watch your practice grow as well.
Thank you. So I'd love to start with the discussion about empowerment, the word empowerment. And there's so much that's out of control when our clients are facing divorce, when anyone is facing divorce. So how do you help your clients deal with that feeling of powerlessness and move them to a place of feeling more empowered? What exactly do you do? Because I know you do it. So how do you do it? What do you do?
Yeah, it's such a great question, and it's the perfect question for anyone who's thinking about stepping into divorce to hear, because it's a pivot, and it's a simple yet it's an easy yet not simple pivot. And the pivot is to go from focusing outwardly. You want to control your soon-to-be ex. You want to control the way your attorney does things, or the way the court goes, or how much time you have with the children, all of these external things. And when we're focused externally on things that we have no control over, it's very disempowering because we're trying to grab at the wind and we're not having any luck at it. And so the pivot is you're going to go through this season that is challenging and difficult and triggering. And if you focus on the one thing you have control of going through the whole process, you will begin to see changes in yourself that build your confidence and your calm and your clarity, and that brings empowerment. And so what we say to our clients and our followers is everything is a mirror. One of my favorite sayings is every upset is a setup. And so if every time you're triggered, rather than looking across the room at him or her, or whatever else is triggering you, you take a moment, maybe not in the moment, but right afterwards to say, did I go from 0 to 100? Did I just go from 0 to 20? And what was my story? What was the story in my head? He's doing that purposely to get to me. She's going to steal the children from me. Like whatever the story is, that's causing more of the reaction and the disempowerment than actually what's happening. And so the pivot is to focus on your thoughts, get really clear on what's my story, and begin to separate fact from fiction. And when you get clear on what happened, what's my reaction to it, and then there's a whole process of, most of us aren't reacting to something for the first time in the midst of the divorce, right? You've been having this reaction throughout your broken marriage and maybe throughout your whole life in different relationships. And so the opportunity to get to know yourself better and to either heal the wounds that are coming to the surface or refine the character faults that we all have, that's where the gold is. And that's where the empowerment begins.
So you help somebody who's, gets triggered by something they're spouse did for the umpteenth time. He did it again.
Yes.
She's upset. I'm using a male-female couple here as an example. And she says, Karen, she has a coaching call with you and says, I don't know, give me an example, Karen. What's something you hear regularly that's very triggering for your
Yeah, I can't believe he did it again. He promised that he would, be home on the weekend with the kids. He promised that he would start coming home for dinner. He promised X and he did it. And the saying is typically, I can't believe. And so my first question is, okay, so you just told me you were married for 25 years. Has he ever done that before? And the answer is always all of the time. And so then we look at, so then why can't you believe it? And I just get real quiet because that's the reflection in. Because I want him to change every day. I want him to wake up being different. Well, that's on you. He's actually being really consistent. And so if you start looking at, well, I guess I can believe it. Well, then why aren't you expecting it? You're already stepping into divorce. You're going to leave this. What if you were expecting and accepting of his behavior instead of resistant and reactive around it?
Right.
And that's what changes everything.
So in that situation where he didn't, he was going to be on duty parent that weekend. They're trying out a new parenting schedule. They haven't separated yet, but we've tried. I'll be on duty this weekend, then you do next weekend, to try to get used to what happens when we're separated. And he didn't have the kids ready to go at a certain time, or when it was time to switch to her, the kids, he didn't get home in time again.
Right.
This happened again. Okay. So how would someone deal with that? What's the coaching you give other than he did it again? So how do they feel more empowered? What can they do in that situation?
You have a plan B. It's that simple. So I had a client with actually exactly that. Dad was going to try and take the kids every other weekend because I was encouraging them to practice what they were negotiating for, to see if it even made sense. And then Dad didn't show up, or he took the kids for half the weekend, or whatever the case may be, and none of this was a surprise. So then the idea is, okay, every other weekend you're giving Dad the opportunity to do exactly what he's negotiating for. But you're expecting that it's not going to happen. So you have a plan B. So let's say it's me and I have plans Friday night because Dad was going to pick up the kids, after school. I have a babysitter set up just in case Dad doesn't show up. My plans don't get blown up. The kids are taken care of, and it's good information. And that's the other thing. Just start listing your good information. I'm trying to negotiate something. Dad or mom, whoever it is negotiating this thing that they're not showing themselves to be capable of doing. I'm just going to keep a little journal, all good information, so that when I speak to my attorney, when I sit down at the negotiation table, I don't blast you. I don't judge you. I don't say you're bad. I say, you know what I've noticed? I've noticed you're strongly negotiating for every other weekend and whatever. And yet for the last 6 weeks, you've only been able to do it one weekend. Can we talk about that? Totally different, right? I'm not triggered. I'm not like, you blew up my weekend. I'm expecting and accepting, and I'm preparing. And there could be a person listening who says, I shouldn't have to do all of that. And that's why you're heading toward divorce.
Right. And when that person then comes to me as their divorce attorney and says, he's asking for, every other weekend, I can show you that what's happening and what's not happening. And I want to talk about this. And then I have more information to talk to their attorney about, or talk to the other professionals who might be working with us, in a neutral capacity. There might be a therapist that they're seeing, the child's therapist, somebody who might be helping with the parenting side, bringing this information to them. And then there's this is happening in one of my cases right now. And the husband's had to admit, I'm not ready for 50-50. I can't. My work schedule doesn't allow for it. It's probably not in the best interest of the kids. And it's allowed. So in this case, the wife stepped into, yes, I want you to have 50-50. We tried it. It didn't work. He accepts it doesn't work. They're saying, okay, we're going to put this on the back burner. We're going to maybe someday, our agreement will say in the future, we'll consider this again. But they have criteria now that they
Yes.
need to live through and look up, work towards. And so if you could help somebody feel, empowered in that regard, it just it shifts for everybody. Actually, the kids are better off. She's better off. He's better off. Whoever, you're coaching. It's not just them. It helps the whole family.
And it helps their relationship with their attorney, because to your description, now they're showing up more as a helpful, engaged partner with their attorney, as opposed to just this hot mess, reactive, and often judgmental individual, which gets nobody anywhere.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So another, and so that's when you're in the divorce process, and that's how you're helping. We're talking about that situation where you can help someone feel more empowered when they're dealing with somebody else's mishigas, who they are, right? What about prior to saying they want the divorce? Like it could take years for them to say, yes, I want to end my marriage, and then actually letting their spouse know. So I see this especially with women. I don't know why. Maybe you know why. So when they contact us for legal advice, we can definitely give them advice. We can tell them what their rights and obligations are. We can help them look at different divorce processes. But if they're not emotionally ready to step into announcing that they want it and that they know that this is the right step for them, I can't help them move forward. So it's one of the reasons you and I are developing a program together, which we'll be announcing more about in the near future. But how do you help people, especially women, who are scared to leave and get stuck in this unhappy and toxic relationship for years, months, years, whatever it may be, and don't know how to get off that fence and move forward? What's the coaching you can help do there?
Yeah, and that's such a key and powerful piece. When you've been in a marriage for so many years, and even a marriage where that your garden variety divorce, where there's no like huge power imbalance or anything, there's kind of like the devil versus the devil you don't. And so divorce is so uncertain. Am I going to keep the marital home? If you're a stay-at-home parent, like, oh my God, the thought of not being with my kids 24/7, am I going to be able to afford it? So the fear drives the paralysis. The fear always drives the paralysis. When I ask people, we ask them a question, I don't know. And then the question is, if you came home tomorrow and your spouse's bags were packed and he was sitting on the step waiting for you to come home and telling you, I can't do this anymore, what's your first emotion? And the first or second one is often relief if they know. And so then we know, okay, you know that it's time to go, but your fear story is so loud and so blaring in your head. And so what we do is we actually begin to piece apart. Let's talk about the fear. And fear is the acronym false evidence appearing real. And so they imagine the worst case scenario squared. So I'm not just going to have financial problems. I'm going to be in the street homeless with my kids. I'm not going to just not have my kids every other weekend. I'm like going to barely see my kids. And so they go to these worst case. And so the first thing we do is help them root into what might be real. That's going to be displeasing, but not scary as all get out. And so that's the first thing. And I just had this conversation with a woman the other day. And so there were two things. One, it was the extent of her fear. And the other thing was when you get into, she would get into why and what's going to happen. And so those two things, why he's doing things, which would trigger her so much that she would say, I have such an emotional fog, I can't think clearly. So when you bring down and you go for fact rather than fiction, and you really bring down that fear, and that exercise, you begin to think more clearly. And once they can think more clearly, then they can start taking those steps. But the key is to get educated, because the other piece is they have their spouse's story in their head, and their spouse is just scared too. So it's like, you're not getting my IRA, and I'm going to take the kids and all this. And so they have to talk to you, Andrea. If they don't speak, and I always say, is she a matrimonial attorney? Like, let's bring some humor into this, because why are you listening to that person? What makes you think that your soon-to-be ex knows anything more about legal rights and what's going to happen than you do? Please go speak to a professional who does this full time, so that you can be filling your head with factual possibility instead of the fear of that your ex is pouring into you.
Yeah. Well, so when you say that you have the spouse's story in there, what they're literally saying, it's not that they're imagining what the story is, but like the the spouse is saying this is true, or I will never do that, and that's what you mean by the story.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not self.
If you ever leave me,
Yeah.
you think you can, well, let me tell you it. And everyone's operating out of fear. Everyone's operating out of fear and insecurity. And so that story's just, I tell them, here, wah, 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 and go and talk to the people who actually know. Like, don't let that be sticky. That's not helpful.
So what about if it's a high conflict marriage? You said even if it's a garden variety, not a big power imbalance, but what if there is a power imbalance in the way, there's different kinds of power imbalances. It could be about different information about money, knowledge about finances. It could be a verbal imbalance. It could, sometimes physical, but we're not talking about abusive relationships, but just higher conflict. One person's not as powerful in the relationship as the other. And so, is there anything different you do with that couple, with that person who wants to leave and doesn't know how to make the decision?
Yeah. So with high conflict, you deal with tendencies. And what I would say to the audience is, whatever you do, please don't diagnose your soon-to-be ex. It's not helpful.
You hear a narcissist a lot.
Oh my goodness.
Every other client says their husband's a narcissist.
So high conflict and the cause of it and what have you is not relevant to us. High conflict is someone who is uncompromising, so it's really hard to get them to be flexible and compromise. High conflict is someone who lives in the black and white and has a really hard time engaging in the gray, which is what divorce negotiation is all about, and marital negotiation is all about, right? High conflict is someone who might remember things different, that like revisionist history. And so to the person who's been living with a high conflict personality, it's very debilitating to our psyche. And that was my experience. And so, especially if you're open-minded, you start questioning yourself to the point where you find yourself in a ditch of self-doubt and a lack of self-esteem. And so that requires, so when we talk to those people, it's the same conversation, but it's like on steroids. And so the accepting is a big part. So most people are so resistant, and they know when we talk to them, it's like when you finally get them to talk about, well, how true are these things that your spouse is saying, or that you're going to be in this terrible situation? They know, but they're frozen. They're frozen and paralyzed in a way that your average person isn't. And so the first thing we're really doing is we're trying to help them reconnect with themselves. They're lost. And one of the things I'll say is their spouse is not only renting space in their head, like their thoughts aren't even there. One of the things I realized was something would happen, and my first thought would be, what's my ex going to think? What's he going to say? How is he going to react? Before I even tapped into, what do I think about this situation and what's my emotional reaction? I was so lost that I was tiny and he was loud and large. You cannot move forward without shifting that. And so that's a practice of, and it's a practice of stopping, noticing, and challenging the thought. The thought is always, how true is that? And if someone says, but it is true, okay, so what else is true? Beginning to create some space for your reality and your perspective. And the more you do that, you begin to root back into who you are, and you begin to find your voice. And it's a practice and a journey that takes time, but there's, back to every upset as a setup. In high conflict, you have so many opportunities, dozens a day practically, to do this work. And you find that you start moving forward out of paralysis pretty quickly. And again, you'll notice it's all what's happening between the ears. I'm not even talking about the external, because so much of it begins with the internal.
And as it begins in the internal, then you're not reacting the way you are, and the other person has to start shifting because they're not getting the reaction that they're used to getting. They're not getting the feedback that
Right.
that they are used to, and then things start shifting. Again, it starts with you.
The spouse's control over you changes. So in the beginning, oftentimes with high conflict, if the high conflict personality could put on a mask, the spouse of is a hot mess. They're a rageaholic. They're like frothing at the mouth. They're so frustrated and angry, and I don't understand. And how could this be that they present as the higher conflict personality? That's a big thing we talk about. It's like, we need you to get to that level, calm place so that whatever is going on with your spouse begins to show. And so that's a key right there, is and then the more the dance changes, because the more you're in control of yourself, he or she may get angry first. It may actually seem worse and harder before it seems easier. But as long as you keep on that track of just rooting back into who you are, the better off you're going to be in the long run.
Yeah. I always say, coaching, I want my clients to be working with a divorce coach. Therapy's one thing. Therapy's more about why you married this person, and coaching is about how to get out of this marriage and move on to a different life. Like, it's really just moving you forward. But it's also, I always say, it's about helping you not be triggered by your spouse as much as not triggering them. So it goes both ways. Like, you have to take responsibility for your action and your action. And usually there's that dance that, it goes round and round.
And I think what you just said is so important, because for those divorcing anyone, and certainly high conflict, you're so focused on all of their flaws and all of their and what's wrong with them, that you're missing the treasure, which is, what did I bring to the table? Am I being the person I want to be? Am I the who I want to be? And what can I do to change myself? That's where all the power lies. And at the end of the day, you're divorcing them. You want to emerge the healthiest version of yourself, so that you can be a good parent, that you can, attract good bosses, good partners.
Yes. Have the life that you want, that you're not having now, right? So let's just talk a little more about I know you're one of the few coaches I know, honestly, that coaches men and women. I know more women probably seek out coaching than men, but you have a healthy male clientele, right? And
yeah, we're about 70-30, and we are one of the few divorce coaching businesses out there that most are female divorce coaches coaching women. And you're right. I mean, women in general ask for directions more, ask for help more. But the truth is, there's a lot of guys out there who really want to do this right and emerge better and healthier, so that they can find healthy love too. And they're great to work with. They're different.
How are they different? What differences do you see?
One of the things I'll say is, I think men appreciate the men I've worked with have said, therapy's okay, but I love coaching, because they're wired to fix things. And there's also, coaching starts in the head. It's like, your thoughts are hardwired into your feelings are hardwired into your actions. So that's the foundation upon which we work. Men often feel much more comfortable talking about their thoughts than their feelings. In fact, one guy said to me, the longest distance I ever travel is from my head to my heart. And it's hard sometimes. And so, but when we get them talking about their thoughts, possibility opens up, and then we can help them see, well, how does your thinking impact your emotional reactivity? And so we get them there. So that's the first thing I'll say. The second thing is that a lot of times we'll be working with men who are they're very articulate, they're very passionate. Men are usually very afraid of losing their children, and they're angry and resentful because since their division of labor was often to be out in the workforce, now they're entering the divorce process and they're feeling punished, penalized for not spending enough time with the kids, but that wasn't their division of labor. But the way they go about negotiating can feel very bullying and very hurtful to the wife. And so the way you negotiate in the boardroom and the way you negotiate in the bedroom has to be different. And that's what we talk to them about not only what is it you want and what is it you fear, but how are you communicating that? And is that serving you? And maybe her reaction is partially based on what feels not just assertive but aggressive, and so that really helps to help them see what it is they want, get really clear on it, and then notice the way that they're going about communicating their needs.
Yeah, that's I need to know the why, why before I can help somebody achieve something in an agreement in legal form. I need to understand why it's important to them. And that's how we negotiate here. And not it's not positional based negotiation. It's we call it interest based negotiation. So
Right.
why do you want to spend more time with your children? Why do you want to what does more time mean to you? Why do you want to walk them to school in the morning? Why do you want to make sure they wake up in your home more mornings than they don't? What's important to you, and then we have more. So if they can if you can help them tap into that, because sometimes they don't know. If coaching can help them understand the why
Right.
and how they're, and then how to express it in a healthier way that can bring in the other parent in a way and create a new partnership that they didn't have.
Right.
They didn't have this during their marriage. They can have a different co-parenting relationship as a divorced couple that better than they ever had before. But they're not going to
Yes.
be able to do that doing the same thing they always did.
Yeah, and when you dial down the reactivity, those conversations between the couple can begin to happen too. If I'm not being told as dad that I'm like a loser parent, if I'm, if my soon-to-be ex is saying, I've been with the kids 100% of the time, this is really scary for me, and I haven't seen you do it, and that's where we always go to. You're in the early stages. Let's practice now. What is she asking for? What is he asking for? Let's create let's create a practice parenting plan. And that way everybody gets to see, oh my God, dad can take the kids home, give them a bath, get them to school in the morning. And maybe her pigtails don't look as good as when you do them, but who cares? And then the question, how important is it? Which is always front and center because everything is important. Not really. How important is it?
Right.
Yeah, so that makes a big difference.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you. I mean, this is our half hour went so fast. I'm surprised we're at this time already. So, Karen, I hope we can talk again at another podcast. But in the meantime, I'm wondering, as I ask all my guests, what is the one tip you would give for somebody to have a better divorce? Is there something you can offer?
Practice acceptance. If you practice that, whatever is, whether you like it or not, it still is. Whether you react to it or not, it still is. When you can practice acceptance, you shift your energy and you open up possibility to, given that this is the case, what are my choices? When you're in resistance, you're not going to see any choices because you just want it to be different. So the practice of acceptance is powerful from the very early stages of should I mend or should I end, straight through to co-parenting post-divorce.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Karen. So tell us, how can people best find you, get in touch with you? Anything you want to offer?
Yeah, we have so Journey Beyond Divorce is the website, and because we've talked a lot about the early stages, we have a program that's kicking off for the first time in January 2023 called Get Off the Fence and Leave Your High Conflict Marriage. And we also offer a free rapid relief call, which is a 1-hour coaching call for those who are interested in support. And you can find both of those on the homepage of Journey Beyond Divorce.
Great. Thank you so much, Karen.
You've been tuning in to another episode of A Better Divorce podcast with Andrea Vacca. Thank you for subscribing, leaving your positive comments and reviews, and sharing the show with others. You can watch episodes at vaccalaw.com, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And you can listen through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. Bye for now, and remember, you can have a better divorce.